The Mind's Eye podcast with BJ Turnoff is on Stitcher Radio, iTunes, Podbean, all major platforms. Thanks for listening. Thanks for subscribing. Feed your head, engage your brain, and enter the mind's eye, the intersection of history and mystery, the center for science and the strange, and your source for the criminal to the subliminal. I'm DJ BJ Turnoff, your host of this auditorium of audacity. Let's give it up. Nice digital round of applause to the World Food Program. And I hope you can sense a little bit of sarcasm in that one, and let me tell you why in a brief moment. But congratulations, Nobel Peace Prize to the World Food Program. And I'm quoting the selection committee for why, for their effort to combat hunger, for its contribution to bettering conditions for peace in conflict-affected areas, and for acting as a driving force in its effort to prevent the use of hunger as a weapon of war and conflict. And that sounds like it makes sense and totally fantastic, but until you do just even a little bit of digging and find that it wasn't only just 2 years ago that the World Food Program was dead last in a study conducted by the Center for Global Development of similar organizations. Not only that, but other surveys found that the culture of the WFP had major issues, including harassment amongst its employees. And I don't know, maybe they have made those type of sweeping changes in 2 years to deserve this year's Nobel Peace Prize, but hard to kind of believe. And regardless, it doesn't look good for them or the Nobel Peace Prize. Now what I want you to do is just go to Google search, put in the list of previous winners, and you'll see that some of them are definitely controversial, but there is, a subjective nature to some of them. So fair enough, I totally get that aspect of it. Some of them are just kind of outright mind-blowingly confusing with, Al Gore, for example, and his climate change initiative. I'm not really sure what that has to do with peace. I'm not sad that he started it, but what does that necessarily have to do with peace? Some of them are just so ridiculous, it's actually comical. I'm looking at Cordell Hull and Yasser Arafat. And come on now, this is the Nobel Peace Prize, the most prestigious and admired award in the world, arguably. When you look at the list, something is just completely off with their winners. And that is the exact reason why I invited tonight's guest, Unni Turrettini, author. You've also seen her on her own TEDx Talks. Unni just came out with the book, Betraying the Nobel, The Secrets and Corruption Behind the Nobel Peace Prize. That book, this show, we are going to examine the Nobel Peace Prize, its history, how it's awarded, and all of the politics and scandal that surround its previous choices when the Mind's Eye returns. Appreciate you sticking around. I get it. Trust me, there is definitely some type of cosmic comical irony that Alfred Nobel, the creator of the Nobel Peace Prize, he also happens to be the inventor of dynamite. If you find that funny, you're probably going to love the IG Nobel. It's a satiric prize awarded annually to 10 unusual scientific achievements that, quote, make people laugh and then make them think. Such examples from this year are how pizza might protect you against cancer. Thank you for that one. Why wombats poop in cubes. I actually didn't even know that. Which country's paper money was the grossest? Ugh. Or trying to measure the pleasure of scratching an itch. I'm just going to go with a lot. Read about these studies and other hilariously thought-provoking ones nominated by the IG. The postings right now on our Facebook and Twitter at Mind's Eye Show, or just go to our website, themindseyemedia.com, where you'll find links to everything. More information about tonight's guest, author and speaker Unni Turrettini. She's going to spill the beans on the secrets and corruption behind the Nobel Peace Prize. Back in a Mind's Eye moment. Our guest is Unni Turrettini, writer, lawyer, citizen, activist, and international speaker. Clearly a bit of a Renaissance woman here. Unni, much obliged for your time. Welcome to the Mind's Eye.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
So you went from before, you wrote about mass murderer Anders Breivik. When you put your name into Google, a ton of your TED Talks are going to come up. And you really talk a lot about creating, a more connected society. Now you're talking about the Nobel Peace Prize and some corruption surrounding that. How did you get from point A and B to C?
It's the way I think of it is that it's to create a more connected and including world, we have to look at leadership. And to me, the Nobel Peace Prize as an institution has a role to play in that, because the Nobel Peace Prize is one of the most prestigious prizes in the world, and people, it's commented on by pretty much, every newspaper or media outlet in the world every year. And the Nobel Peace Prize winners, they have the capacity of being beacons of hope and inspiration to the rest of us. And that is what Alfred Nobel wanted with his prize. So when I really got curious about the Nobel Peace Prize was back in 2009 when Barack Obama won the prize. And he had been in office for less than 2 weeks when he was nominated for the prize. And that's when I started, thinking about this, like how can this be? So I started digging into the prize and did some research. And this was sort of a project that went over years, actually. Just looking into the history of the prize and previous winners and what the motivations might be for these selections, because it wasn't always obvious that they were prizes to promote peace. So, and although, a lot of these winners are actually good people and have done a lot of good for people on the planet, they weren't exactly within the scope of the Nobel Peace Prize and what Alfred Nobel stipulated in his last will.
Yeah, what exactly is that? Because, that's truly, that, like you said, that's the crux of your issue. Main issue. It's your probably biggest contention. So how are they going against these words?
So just to go back to what the last will says, because I think that's something that a lot of people actually don't know. So Alfred Nobel, he said that the prize should be given. Well, he had five prizes, right? So chemistry and a medical and a literature, and then there's an economic prize, which actually came after as a in memory honoring Alfred Nobel, but that is actually not part of the Alfred Nobel's Peace Prizes. But the Peace Prize is the one that has received the most attention and is also the most controversial, probably because of the selections the Norwegian Nobel Committee has made. And so what they were supposed to do, they were supposed to select someone, according to Alfred Nobel, who is a peace champion, having done the best work for fraternity between nations, the abolition or reduction of standing armies, and for holding and promotion of peace congresses. So basically, gathering people together and creating a more permanent change in society through peaceful means. So he did not mean that he did not want to promote the deterrent effect of arms, for example. So which was it's been huge. It's still huge today, but especially during the Cold War, that was, when countries were arming up between, East and West. And that was not something that he would consider worthy of winning the Peace Prize.
We do live in a different world than Alfred Nobel. Why shouldn't the committee be able to select winners with that same perspective?
Absolutely. And that is something that I write about in my book, actually, that things have evolved. He wrote this testament in the 1890s, and he passed away in 1896. So of course things have changed between then and now, and so, for instance, prizes that go to people who work for the environment, for global warming, human rights, and just humanitarian awards. I believe personally that they should be included into the Peace Prize. But the problem, the way it is today, is that there is no oversight into what the committee is doing. So they have expressed that they do not respond to anyone. They don't answer to anyone. They do exactly what they want to. And whatever basically, what seems to be happening is that whatever cause they deem worthy that year, they will reward it, and they'll call it peace. And that causes a problem, because then we don't know what to expect from the Peace Prize. And also because the big problem with the committee is that the committee consists of 5 people, and they are selected by the Norwegian parliament. So what has happened is that parliament has selected politicians, and now since they can't select active politicians anymore, they put sort of these retired politicians as a thank you for their long and loyal service to their political party. So what happens then is that you get a committee that is extremely loyal to the Norwegian government. And so we see that in almost all of the winners. There is a connection between Norwegian foreign policy or just Norwegian values and, in terms of the government and the prize winners. So that means, and because also the whole selection process, everything is supposed to be held secret for 50 years after the fact. We know nothing about how the committee actually works, and if they really, dig deep into the candidates and research the candidates, or whether they just select them on a whim because someone is a celebrity and it would make Norway look good to select this person. So there's a lot of that involved. And so I think there's a lack of trust now that we see increasingly in leadership globally, and also in the Nobel Peace Prize as an institution. And that's where the problem is that if they're going to expand the scope of the prize, it has to be done through proper channels. Let's not forget that a last will and testament is a legal document. So you actually cannot start giving it outside the scope without first going through proper legal channels to expand it. And that's absolutely possible to do. It's just that the committee hasn't done it. So what we're seeing now is, and what I think people are being more and more outraged, is we're seeing people who win the prize, and we're asking ourselves, well, what the heck has that person really to do with the cause of peace? And but I hear what you're saying, that there is a need for expansion, and there is a need to include other things into the Peace Prize as well, because it leads to a more peaceful and harmonious world. So there is that for sure. So there is a need.
Reason why there's some subjectivity there and openness is, Nobel's will, for the Peace Prize, it's pretty intentional with his words, but it's also lacking a lot of details, particularly when it comes to, the committee selecting winners, all these issues. So I think part of that is a problem that he created. Another part is, like you said, there's a little too much, too much handshaking there between the government. And, it sounds like almost like, in the United States, where, it's almost a revolving door between the government and lobbyists. When you go from one, you go to the other. It's kind of almost like, all right, we're rewarding you now, for, serving your time as a politician. Now here, go make, a bunch of $1 million or whatever,
Yes.
Now in the will itself, I thought it was an interesting, and I definitely could be wrong about this. Maybe I interpreted it wrong, but there was an interesting power structure kind of created. From my understanding, that you said that nobody kind of overlooks the selection committee, but I thought there was the Nobel Foundation who kind of ultimately has control.
That is absolutely true. Except that the committee in Norway, sitting in Norway, this foundation is in Stockholm, because Alfred Nobel was Swedish, and all the other prizes are given out by Swedish institutions. But he gave the Peace Prize to Norway for some reason. Which is actually quite interesting. And so the Norwegian committee sits there, and they feel that they are completely independent from, they do not want the oversight from the foundation in Stockholm, which actually by law has the right to supervise and to put guidelines in place and ask for some sort of consistency. Now they haven't done that, and to me, in my opinion, there is historical and political reason for that, because when Alfred Nobel actually selected the Norwegian Parliament to be responsible for selecting the committee that would hand out the prize, Norway was governed by Sweden. We were in union with Sweden, and Norway was actually the little brother with no political power or no. We had no military at that time, and it was very weak and poor. A lot of experts and historians, they believe that Alfred Nobel gave the Peace Prize to Norway to avoid it becoming a politicized prize. Now, of course, things evolved and Norway evolved, and with the discovery of oil and hydroelectricity. And so Norway today is one of the most wealthy countries in the world, and that has also changed this humility, I would say, that Norway used to have and doesn't have so much anymore. So, and because of these tensions between Sweden and Norway in the early years, and Norway really trying to, when it broke free finally in 1905 from Sweden, and really trying to keep the independence from Sweden, there was, we see this unwillingness to cooperate or take any advice or orders or any sort of instructions from the Nobel Foundation. And the Nobel Foundation hasn't tried either in at all, actually, since since ever. And which is really too bad, because it has a role in supervising and it's not doing its job.
Like you said before you start off, the Nobel Peace Prize, that really is considered one of the highest accolades in the world. The committee, as you pointed out, hasn't exactly always picked the highest quality. And you give a few examples in the book, but in your opinion, who do you think is one of the most egregious?
I've been thinking about that, actually, Brian, and it's kind of hard to pick because there's a few.
Yeah, they do have a little bit of a pattern, giving warmongers, anti-Semites, and women haters the Peace Prize, especially in the first half of the 20th century.
Exactly. But so there was the prize in 1994 that went to Yasser Arafat, Shimon Peres, and Yitzhak Rabin, which really, in a way, there were definite hopes of establishing peace in the Middle East. But when we look really into the peace agreements, and there wasn't even a peace agreement actually signed.
Yeah, that's the most comical part about it.
Exactly. So, it really wasn't. And also, war broke out again even before they announced the prize. So even if they were nominated, between the nomination, and that time, and they actually announced the prize in October, there was no peace. So that was definitely premature, to say the least. And and especially Yasser Arafat, has just proven, before and after, that he had absolutely no intentions of making, even trying to make peace. So if there was definitely that one. The funny thing about that year was that the Norwegian government and Norwegian diplomats were actually very much involved in the Oslo Accords that led to the somewhat agreement, to create peace in the Middle East. And so it seems there's been a couple of examples where the Norwegian committee has awarded people. And this is, basically just speculations on my side. But why would they choose these candidates unless it was also to shine a light on Norway's efforts as a peace champion? Yeah.
kind of patting themselves on the back there a little bit through the light on somebody else.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's also in 1973 the award to Henry Kissinger
Oh God,
and
yeah.
Duc Thu of North Vietnam. And I mean, there was, definitely not peace. An agreement had been signed, and Lu Duc Thu, the leader of North Vietnam, actually refused to receive the prize, writing a letter to the committee telling them that peace has not been, there's no peace here. So I don't understand why I should come to Oslo or to receive this prize. And
Hmm.
so and the U.S. was carpet bombing North Vietnam and Cambodia at the time that they were actually rewarding the prize. So it's really it's comical, and really sad that they would go through with that. But that is one example out of many where during the Cold War and also in the aftermath of World War II, when Norway was building itself up again after having been occupied by Nazi Germany for 5 years after the war, and really building a tighter bond with the United States as someone that would protect Norway in case of another attack. So, and we see that also during the Cold War in 1973 when they rewarded Henry Kissinger, is also strengthening those bonds with the United States because Norway is located so close. We actually have a border to Russia. So, I mean, and Russia has expressed at several occasions that they would be interested in taking over Norway because of the long coastline and strategic position. So there is definitely an interest in Norway, a political interest of strengthening ties with the United States against a threat like Russia.
But it's also used to reprimand countries like the U.S. It's done that in the beginning of the 21st century, right?
Absolutely. That's actually really, that started in 2002. No, actually it started in 2001, selecting the United Nations just right after 9/11 and President Bush decided to go to war against terrorism, and seeking allies on its own without first going through the UN and the United Nations channels. So that was really, and they even expressed this, that was a signal to the United States to not think that they could do this on their own, that there is a world, in a way, government in the UN, and that we should use the UN for these sort of things and not just go to war on each other on our own. So that was the first one, and those sort of a reprimand too. And then in 2002, the committee gave the prize to Jimmy Carter, and he actually should have gotten the prize in 1978 for the peace agreement that he managed to get signed between Israel and Egypt. But he was nominated too late after the cutoff date, which is February 1st every year. So, but and he has been nominated pretty much, I think, every year up until when he received it in 2002. But for some reason, they didn't deem him worthy until in 2002. And that year, committee chairman actually called that year's award kick in the leg, which is a direct translation from Norwegian, to President George W. Bush for the U.S. war on Islamic terrorism. And by kick in the leg, the chairman meant a slap in the face. So they're so arrogant that they actually tell us what their motivations are, even if it's way out of scope and not at all what Alfred Nobel had, intended for his prize. So that was one. And then you have, there's a long list here. The 2005, the winner was the International Atomic Energy Agency. And the Director General there, Mohammed El Baradei. And although that sounds like a promising prize, they really selected him and this agency because El Baradei had been really outspoken in opposing American policy for years and was an open foe of President Bush. And then, of course, Barack Obama was probably the last sort of slap in the face that they said that also. I believe it wasn't at the nomination or at the Peace Prize ceremony, that it was really sending a signal to the U.S., the former administration, that this is the kind of president that we want. We don't want you or any of your guys. We want, Barack Obama and this type of president who is more open-minded in cooperating with foreign countries and all the things that Obama actually said in his speeches, when he was promoting himself as, the candidate for presidency.
And by the way, I'm okay with Carter, rock and roll president, winning, his token Peace Prize. I mean, I think there's a legend that he smoked a joint in the White House with Willie Nelson, so I think that's deserving of the Peace Prize itself. But, it was just unelegant the way they gave it to him.
That
is true, and that's kind of like what their deal is now. They don't really care for elegance, except for when it's their award ceremony. But. Yeah. Now, before we were talking about how the relationship between the Norwegian government and the selection committee, it's a little too close for comfort. Essentially just kind of giving you a nice, easy post-political job. But sometimes the committee does get it right. There's plenty of examples of that. You named a few examples of when they got it wrong, and sometimes the award is given to country, to people where it does actually hurt relations between Norway and other countries, like when they gave it to the Dalai Lama in China. So doesn't that really kind of prove that the committee is independent, just probably poorly guided?
Yes, and they have gotten it right a couple of times, and Dalai Lama is one example, and Liu Xiaobo as well, who won the prize, also a Chinese dissident, and that actually hurt Norway and Norway's commercial interest with China, and Norway has ever since worked to try to improve relations with China. And since then, actually, they haven't selected any dissidents or anything like that. But because that became quite a stir within the government, and also so it is true that they have selected a couple of times, but they're too rare and far in between. These, sort of the dissidents and the more courageous. As to what I would hope, I'm hoping that the committee actually will be more brave in its choices, even if it hurts Norway's foreign policy or commercial interests. So that's something that I'm hoping for in the future.
Now, the dirty little secret, about the nomination, about not being nominated, doesn't really mean anything. Hitler and Trump have both been nominated. Hitler as a joke, but that causes stir in itself. And in the book, you refer to the committee's investigations into the nominees as very sketchy. Quote. And part of that is because the information, how they select, it's all kept secret. Records are sealed for 50 years after the fact, which seems a bit over the top. I mean, why is it ran and done in such secrecy when we know nowadays transparency is so important?
Absolutely. And this is, again, something that is from the old days, from the early days of the prize. And back then, it was, probably just meant well that this, the secrecy was probably just supposed to protect the committee from outside influence. But today, as we see, it's serving against the committee and our trust in their work. So that's something that I'm suggesting, in my book, is that they open up. Let's open up, let it become transparent. And then also perhaps the transparency will allow people to come forward with information on some of the candidates, which is not public today. So that will also, I think, facilitate the selection process and definitely give us more trust in how they select and how thorough they are in their selection process. There's one example. In 2011, the winner was then president of Liberia, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, and she was the first female president in Africa, which is definitely the reason she received the prize. So she's both an attempt to select more women, and also she's a Black woman and the first president. So that was definitely a sort of a gender boosting prize, and also a celebrity award, because Ellen Johnson Sirleaf was on the cover of Time magazine and named one of the most powerful women in the world. And so there was, they probably felt pressured that, okay, we also need to reward this woman. But when we look into, we don't know what research the committee did with that example. What we do know is that the experts on Liberia and Africa that have been contacted outside of in a different the worthiness of that candidate,
the investigation of sorts.
Investigation, exactly. It was a separate investigation, and all the experts around the world on Liberia has all said they do not understand why Ellen Johnson Sirleaf was selected for the Nobel Peace Prize, because it's commonly known that she was supporting Charles Taylor's rebellion in the Civil War in Liberia. And I mean, he committed genocide, basically. So Ellen Johnson Sirleaf has literally blood on her hands from the Civil War. And she has also installed the same type of governance in Liberia that led to war in the first place. So there's none of the experts really understand that selection, other than the fact that she was the first female president in Africa. So that's one example we have of where we believe that the committee did not do its job in researching properly the candidate.
Or who do you think is most deserving of a victory that hasn't been given that award?
Well, there has been a few actually, but they all passed away, so it's too late. One that is the most striking one that is no longer alive is Mahatma Gandhi. He did not receive the prize.
Yeah, he's called the missing laureate, right?
Exactly. So he's the most striking example, and the committee has actually publicly stated that they regret that they never handed him the prize, although he was nominated also several times. So
I don't know if you read about this, but hasn't Gandhi's statues, some of his statues, been taken down in India recently because some of the younger generation is claiming, that he was racist in his younger days, which there is evidence of in your younger days, and then he was also had some perverse sexual perspectives and experiences. Have you heard about that or thoughts on that?
I actually haven't followed that, so I don't know. But it is true that he actually there's some controversy around Gandhi, because he did actually root for Indians to participate in war. This was during his days in South Africa. And so he has, he tried to sign up Indians to go to war, and during I believe this was the first World War, he learned from his prior mistake. I believe he did in the First World War, but then in the second, he learned from his past mistake, and then he refused to gather Indians to support the British in the World War. So he has done controversial things, of course. In India, his racism, I mean, that's obviously with the caste system, it's very complex in India, and I think things have definitely evolved as well. So some of these older, back in that time, I think he was still pretty avant-garde when it came to racism, even though he was definitely not perfect. So yeah, but that's interesting that you're saying.
Yeah, kind of the cancel culture thing is kind of just, I feel like things are just being looked at too black and white. I mean, someone like Mahatma Gandhi, his statue is being taken down. I mean, personally, we've all had bad days. I would, and said some messed up things. I mean, I'd hate to be judged on some of the things I've said on my worst day. I think that, people just need to kind of keep that in mind, particularly with Gandhi. Having said that, nobody was really safe in the book. I mean, he even had some issues with Mother Teresa.
Yeah. Well, she's definitely, a worthy peace champion if we are to include humanitarian issues into the prize. Now, of course, I mean, she wasn't perfect either. She, was very sort of anti-abortion. And there was, there's some stories about how she treated wealthy people differently from poor people, and, a couple of issues there. I do think, though, that we tend to be more scrutinizing and harder on women than perhaps we are on men. So the fact that, we are judging Mother Teresa, and, and I'm the first one, to do that, is maybe a reason for me to go a little deeper inside myself and ask myself, okay, so, well, nobody is perfect. Mahatma Gandhi was not perfect. None of them are perfect. So, but she did, do such amazing good for people everywhere, and it's such an inspiration. What I don't agree with is that she's portrayed as such a selfless and meek human being, and those are traits that are valued, so valued in our society for a woman, and at least it used to be. And she was so much more than a meek and selfless person. She was a really, really powerful woman. And I think that, we can honor that side of her, because she was really powerful and she managed to do some amazing things, without any means or any, so I think we should hail that side of her instead of her sort of meek and selfless side.
Great point. As much as I think you're deserving of a Nobel for this one, I hate to say I don't think they're going to give it to you for this one. Only out of spite. The content is there, but I have a feeling they're not going to give it to you. Don't let them get you down, though. Well, I really appreciate your time tonight. Is there anything that you want to promote, social media, anything else before I let you go?
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you for your kind words. I definitely think that the Norwegian government and committee will not appreciate my book.
If they were bold, they would at least give you the award if they were bold enough.
I don't think that I'm worthy of any award.
Oh, don't sell yourself short here.
The Nobel, but it's kind of you to say so. I do hope, though. My book is really, I want it to be a hopeful book. It's not it's not a dooming. It's not supposed to be a damning book about the Nobel Peace Prize. I'm shining light on some dark issues that I think there's absolutely a possibility to do something about very easily. And so my book ends on a hopeful note, and I'm hoping it will be, also an inspiration for all of us as individuals to step up and become the peace champions that we can be in our environments, just around us, in our families, with our friends, wherever we are, because I do think that whatever we do, no matter how small it seems, actually matters. So that is my hope with this book. Other than that, I'm on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter as well, although I'm not very active on Twitter. I'm more on Instagram and Facebook. So please follow me there. You can also go to my website, which is unniturrettini.com, and my name is it's horrible spelling. It's UNNITURRETTINI.com. So yeah, and I'm the only one in the world, by the way, with that name. So if you Google me, you'll find me on all these social media.
We have your links up on our social media and website as well. Everybody grab a copy. More secrets, more scandals, and a roadmap to being a peace champion, all in Betraying the Nobel, Secrets and Corruption Behind the Nobel Peace Prize. Unni, I can't thank you enough for connecting with us about this really important topic.
I'm so happy to be here and talk to you, Brian. Thank you so much for giving me the time.
Well, the pleasure's all mine. Mind's Eye wrap up when we return. Let me give you just a little peek behind the curtain. Udi and I recorded this interview a few weeks before the 2020 winner was announced, so that's probably why you figured out why I didn't really ask any questions about it. But if you want to get her take on the World Food Program and if it was deserving of the Nobel Peace Prize, we did have a little bit of exchange about that on Facebook. I think it was on Wednesday's posting, so go check that out again at Mind's Eye Show. We're just going to take a quick 2-week break for the holidays. We'll be back after Thanksgiving. Until then, be well and let well be, and I truly mean that with the holidays coming around, and that extends to your family as well. I'm DJ BJ Turnoff, signing off for the Mind's Eye. The Mind's Eye podcast with BJ Turnoff is on Stitcher Radio, iTunes, Podbean, all major platforms. Thanks for listening. Thanks for subscribing.